Welcome everybody back to another fantastic episode of the Three Man Rush podcast, where I'm your host, Landon Oliver, joined by my two co-hosts, Jared Hawley, Andrew Scott. And today's episode is another really great one where we're going to give you our thoughts on the Carson Wentz deal. We're going to give you our thoughts on the Khalil Mack trade, and then also some NFL combine reactions, dove deep into the combine, some guys that we like, some guys that we didn't, and how that affects their performance and possibly their draft stock. So if you are listening to this on, we're on Spotify, we are on Amazon Prime. If you're listening to this, thank you guys for tuning in. We'd love a subscription from you. If you're watching this on YouTube, for some reason, you're torturing yourself with our ugly faces, but we greatly appreciate it. If you could go ahead and like the video and subscribe as well. Hit the notification bell, if you will, and that'll get you notified every time we post a new video. Now, now that things are kicking off in full swing, you're probably going to be looking at least 1 to 2 videos every single week that we can pump out. So without further ado, how you guys doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. One other little fun nugget too, for those of you that are on YouTube, about 70% of you guys that are listening are currently not subscribed. So if you're looking for, people to cover sports and about 90% football year round, you're looking for people that aren't going to just give you hot takes. Look, I mean, you're already 70% of you are here, and you're just, you're not taking that next step to subscribe to the channel to make sure that you can see all the videos. So, we appreciate you guys listening regardless, but if you want to be able to catch more of the content, not just the ones that YouTube happens to throw your way, make sure to throw down a sub. That way we can, interact more often.
Yeah. And also too, just a quick thing before Jared, goes ahead and takes us to the promised land. We are now on Twitter. It is at 3 Man Rush Podcast on Twitter. We're doing a Twitter giveaway every single month. This one started today. We're giving away a signed Quentin Nelson mini helmet, complete with JSA certification. So the only thing you got to do to win that helmet, you just got to like the post, or not even really like it. You just have to retweet it. You just got to follow us, and then tell us your favorite Quentin Nelson play or memory down in the comment section. And if you could go ahead, like Drew said, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channels as well, because might help you out a little bit there with the entries. So yeah, we're really excited to do that. And it's not always going to be a Colts gift, just if you're worried about that with all of us. We're going to have many different things, from every NFL team. Sometimes it might be jerseys, sometimes it might be helmets, sometimes it just might be, autographed photos, different things like that we're going to start doing. So we're really excited to have you guys along for the ride.
Landon, you're willing to give up your Carson Wentz Indianapolis Colts jersey too.
I am. And if this video hits 225 listens like the other one did, I will even personally sign it with Carson Wentz's signature, and I'll send it to you.
So speaking of Carson Wentz, there is once again some Carson Wentz news to talk about that I'm sure, as there are 2 Colts fans, assuming that Jared is still hanging in there, that are on this podcast. So I'm sure you guys are, pretty excited to talk about this one. So I'll give you the deal, and then I'll let you guys take over. So the Colts traded Carson Wentz in a 2022 second rounder for a 2022 second round pick, 2022 third round pick, and a 2023 third round pick. That is one of those deals like where it becomes a second as long as he plays 70% of the snaps, like kind of the same way the Colts and the Eagles structured it, right? Except it was first to second. Yep. So Washington has a new quarterback. The Colts have a hole at quarterback. How do you guys feel?
Jared, you want to go ahead and take it before I take it over?
I'll leave. Yeah. I feel relieved a little bit. Like, I wasn't high on Wentz to begin with, like before the season started. However, like I say I wasn't high, but it also felt like they would have been a playoff team no matter what, since they made it the previous year with Phillip Rivers. And I thought Wentz would be an upgrade from Rivers. But after seeing the debacle just like coming off the hinges, I don't know, I keep repeating myself every time we talk about Carson Wentz. The numbers are not bad. Like, it's not like he was abysmal and like just god awful, but he made some of the worst plays. Like, if you put a compilation like of the football season from last year together, like the worst plays, he's in 5 out of the 10. Like, it was like literally he's probably the top 5 out of the top 10 worst plays of last season. So not having to deal with that is going to be a relief. I think no matter who they have at quarterback next year, they'll still be in contention with that division being the way it is. And the AFC has gotten stronger. I know you guys got to talk about Russell Wilson last week or the other night. And man, like I think the Colts they're a ways away from actually contending. So I'm completely fine with letting him walk after one season.
Yeah. And to me, so one of the biggest things of the deal that Andrew, didn't mention and might not have been on his sheet was that the Commanders actually took the full salary for Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
So that cleared $28 million off the Colts salary cap. They are now sitting at $70.5 million going into free agency, which is by far the most, of any other team. So we'll see if that dwindles down, if they make a quarterback move here over the weekend, which I fully expect them to here in the next few days. That's probably going to eat into some of that for sure. But that being said, they are really, really poised to hit free agency hard. And I think that's a huge thing, part of that deal, because part of the reason, with the Matthew Stafford trade that they traded Jared Goff and they had to give up that extra pick was so Detroit would take on that full salary. And so they gave him an extra pick for that. The Colts didn't have to do that. Washington took that on, as well as giving the Colts for what I thought was just an absolute heist deal, from the perspective of, I can tell you right now, he was gone regardless. So you're looking at a guy who's a cut candidate. They're just going to outright release him here in the next, week. And they're not going to get anything for him. They ended up flipping that they moved up 5 spots in the draft from 47 to 42, puts them right in contention to either trade up into the late first for a quarterback or possibly draft one of these receivers, tackles that drops. So they move up in the draft. Then on top of that, you get an extra 3rd round pick and then possibly a 2nd round pick next year as well. So, I mean, for a guy that you're just going to outright release and not get anything for, to get a haul like that, as well as them taking on the salary, I just don't I don't know how Chris Ballard did it, but kudos to him, because
I think Washington really wanted Wentz.
Well, I think that's part of it. They missed out on, the quarterbacks that they did want, for sure. And I think part of it is there's some news that came out today that there was some other teams in the discussion. So I think they were able to drive up Washington's price a little bit, because originally it was going to be a 4th rounder and a 6th round pick was the initial deal that Washington offered for him. And then once that kind of competition came, which I don't necessarily know what the other team was, I'm pretty confident it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But don't set that in stone, and don't go quote me on Twitter being like, per the podcast, Tampa Bay
was in the running.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying this is just me kind of speculating because of Bruce Arians' past comments on Carson Wentz. He fits what Bruce Arians likes as a quarterback, and
that's true.
He's been a big fan of him, especially coming out of the draft. And there's an obvious hole there for them. So that's just me kind of speculating. But they were able to drive that price up to, for Washington to pay up for him because there was some competition. And I think for Chris Ballard to make the move he did last year, where the Colts lose their 1st round pick, but still be able to recoup some of that value. I mean, you're never going to recoup the full value of a lost 1st rounder, but I think he did just about as well as he could have in moving on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of it too is I think Washington knew that they needed a quarterback, knew that Wentz was probably going to be their best option on the trade market, depending on how you feel about Jimmy Garoppolo after the Rodgers and Wilson dominoes fell. And then the reality of Wentz was going to hit the free agent market possibly as a cut candidate. And I think Washington had to have that harsh conversation of, are we really a great free agent destination? Are we confident we can lure him to Washington if he's a free agent? So I think they realized if we want this guy, we're going to have to trade for him, because if he has his pick of where he wants to go, and there are teams like Tampa Bay in the mix, even with their roster being as up in the air as it is right now, if you ask me if I want to go play in Washington or if I want to go play in Tampa, I'm going to go to Tampa.
Well, not only do you get Florida, but I don't think there's stadium leak sewage water, so that's also a plus.
Right. So I think Washington had to kind of recognize that as well. Some harsh realities that if they wanted Wentz, they were going to have to trade for him, and then if other teams are in the mix, okay, now we got to up our offer to make sure we get him. So I do think it doesn't move the needle much for me, to be honest. I do think he's a better option than Taylor Heineke, but I mean, I'm not picking them to win the division now because of this. Like I still consider Dallas the favorite in that division. I mean, depending on the moves Philly makes, the Eagles might still be better too, honestly.
What's funny to me about, that whole discussion as well is after the news broke when Carson Wentz traded there, in some of the Vegas betting odds, their odds actually went down to win the Super Bowl.
That's a little like I do think he's a better option than Heineke, so I think that's a little extreme. But
so I do have to ask you guys. So now, going into this year, everybody said like, hey, this is Wentz's last chance. He's reuniting with Frank Reich. He has everything he can want at his disposal. The offensive line, which obviously didn't perform as well as expected, but I mean, it's still, some decent pieces there. Jonathan Taylor just had an MVP caliber season. Michael Pittman really grew into a 1,000-yard receiver there in his second year. So, I mean, he had some pieces to work with. And people were saying, if anybody's going to get this out of him, it's going to be Frank Reich. Well, that didn't end up being the case now. So now he's on to his third team in 3 years. Where does Carson Wentz go from here?
He gets away with being that he's got talent. And not just he's got like God-given abilities that some quarterbacks just don't have. Like he's more athletic than a lot of quarterbacks. Like he can throw it, he can stretch the field. Carson Wentz's problem is Carson Wentz just doesn't get out of his own way, and he doesn't take to coaching whatsoever. From what all the reports I've read, anyways. So he'll always have a job in the NFL, man. Like the way the NFL is structured right now, like with some of the guys that have left too, and this upcoming draft class and everything, like he'll be a starting quarterback for another at least 2 or 3 years.
So I need to say this. It's important for me to get this over with. I was, whenever I'm a Rams fan, and the year that the Rams traded up for number 1, is it Jared Goff or Carson Wentz? And I was banging the table for Carson Wentz. I was a big Wentz fan coming out of college. It obviously was not Carson Wentz. He went to Philly. I loved what I saw early on in the Philly years, kind of validated how I felt coming out of college. And then the injury happens, and then Frank Reich leaves, and there's kind of some chaos in Philly, and you can kind of paint pictures and come up with excuses for why Wentz was declining. So I was not willing to give up on Wentz, and then he got traded to Indy, and I was one of those people that was like, okay, here we go. He's in a great system. He's back with the former offensive coordinator that got the best out of him. Here comes the resurgence. The resurgence. We're going to see Carson Wentz return to elite play again. It's been a long, painful ride, but after what I saw last year, I'm done. I'm out on Carson Wentz. I give up. They might win some games in Washington. They will win some games in Washington, and considering the NFC is not as deep as the AFC, they might even find a way to sneak into the playoffs. But I don't care. Carson Wentz is not that guy. He's not taking you deep into the playoffs. You're not winning a Super Bowl. This is just, they found their way maybe higher up into mediocrity than they were last year. And that's about it. And I think there will always be teams out there that want some mediocre guy to play quarterback, because the reality is there's not very many people that can play the quarterback position in the NFL at a high level. It's just not an easy thing to find. So there's going to be teams that will look in the draft, and then there will be teams that will be left somewhere else searching. And so Wentz might be able to find jobs, stuff like that, but I do not care anymore. I'm not going to get excited for the team he goes to. I'm not going to, create high expectations for the team that he's playing on anymore, or the players around him. I'm out. I'm done. I can't take any more. Can't take any more pain.
Well, yeah, because I had to have you talk me into the trade, because I wasn't a big Carson Wentz guy. I didn't see it, especially after the 2020 year he had in Philly, his last year there. I was just I'm messing Andrew, and I'm like, man, you got to talk me into this, because I know you were a big fan of him. And so, I mean, you talked me into it. I got excited. And then, granted, I'll say this about Carson Wentz. The highs are really high. I mean, he makes just some absolutely insane plays that, I mean, you're talking about maybe 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the NFL can make. Just elite type level plays. The problem is that along with those highs, there are very, very low lows. I mean, we're talking about a guy, maybe the only guy in human history that sprained both of his ankles on one single play. I've never even heard of that injury happening. I've heard of a sprained ankle. I've never heard of 2 sprained ankles. That's just honestly impressive, to be honest. But and then you have the San Francisco in the rain when he tries to make the pass and he throws it right to the 49ers guy. Then of course you obviously have the Titans game when the left-handed shovel. If I never have to watch a left-handed shovel pass while a dude's got 3 guys on him again, my year is made next year, regardless of who the quarterback is.
And then how are you in a win and get in scenario against a team that's about to have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft and you muster up a 4 QBR? Oof. I mean, I know it was much more than one game that the reason the Colts moved on from him, but that is just so mind-blowing to me.
Well, the team itself, I'll say this, and I don't.
It wasn't just
that's what I was going to say.
That game wasn't just on Wentz, but they traded for Wentz for in games like that when the rest of the team is not playing up to par, that your quarterback steps up, takes over the game, and handles an inferior opponent.
He's not that guy.
You're not that guy, pal.
Which is why they moved on, because from what I understand and from what I've been told by some people that are close to the team, have ears in the organization, is they felt like he was just a guy that was along for the ride as opposed to a guy that was willing to step up in those big moments. And as your starting quarterback, you can't have that. And I think that played a big role into why they moved on from him, as well as some other things, which we could get into all day. But it basically just boiled down to, the Colts lost faith in him, especially you could really tell with the play calling as the season went on, the fact that, he played much better at the beginning of the year. And as the year goes on, you're supposed to get more comfortable with the offense, more comfortable with your receivers. And he went the exact opposite way. Even the Patriots game, which is one of the best Colts wins we've had in probably the last half decade, beating New England at that game, they got through for 56 yards the whole game.
Buffalo.
Buffalo, Jonathan Taylor literally almost carried this offense by himself for most of the season, outside of, a couple of those very high flash plays that Carson Wentz made, such as the Arizona play, in which he didn't really have a very good game in the Arizona game up until that one throw. The Baltimore game I thought was really good for him, but for every one of those games, you have a game where he throws for 56 yards. And for every Arizona play he made, you have a play where he's throwing a left-handed shovel pass out of the end zone with 3 guys on him, ends up being a pick 6. You lose the game.
He's the modern Brett Favre.
No.
He is.
No, Brett Favre.
Yes,
no.
He plays in a different NFL than what Brett Favre played, but he makes Brett Favre-like decisions, man.
No.
Maybe some decisions are similar, but their talent is not, though.
No. I look, man, as a former Packers fan growing up before I discovered the Colts.
Oh, no, I'm not saying he's.
And as my mother listens to this podcast,
he's not as good as Brett
I will
Favre.
not compare Carson Wentz to Brett Favre. That is.
I didn't think that's what you were saying, but that's why I wanted to say that to give you an opportunity.
No. I'm not.
Maybe as far as some of the questionable throws.
Man, one guy's in the Hall of Fame, and this guy literally, we're debating
on his third team
he's going to play for. Right. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, Brett Favre can get away with being careless with the football because, like, he's
throwing 40 touchdowns a year also.
Exactly.
Right.
Like Carson Wentz, like, you literally every time he drops back, you're gasping for what's he going to do? It's either going to be some ginormous, like, great pass for 50-yard touchdown to Pittman, or it's going to be like, what the hell was that? Like, how did that even happen? Like, some of his plays are just, you question, like, am I watching football? Like, what am I watching here? Like,
that's a great way to put it. And I think Washington, it's the move they made. It's the move they live with. I know Colts fans are really happy that they did decide to go that route because we got some pretty decent capital out of it. But yeah, there's, Washington fans are already kind of talking themselves. I saw a post today where Carson Wentz is the number 1 rated quarterback in yards per attempt when the weather is exactly 73 degrees.
Somebody did not actually post that.
No, swear to God.
Oh
it's
man,
on Twitter.
those poor people.
Yeah, so I mean they're just they're coping hard right now over in Washington. And what's great about this trade too is now he gets to see Philadelphia twice a year. He has to go into Philadelphia next year, as well as Washington plays at Indianapolis in Lucas Oil next year. So he's going back to Philadelphia next year. He's coming back to Indianapolis next year. And for a guy
you think he'll get booed in Philly?
I don't think. Oh, in Philly, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
100%. Yeah, for sure.
So?
They booed Santa Claus.
Phil, if Jesus Christ
but
himself played for the Cowboys, Philly fans would boo him. Like,
I understand
that's not even
that part.
That's not. I mean, there's a lot
he
of
really
bad
didn't
blood.
do that franchise dirty or nothing.
Oh no, there's a lot of bad blood there, which, like I said, is a whole different episode in itself. Because there's even today there was a report that came out. Brian Mitchell, former Philadelphia Eagle, and LeGarrette Blount, former Philadelphia Eagle, on the Super Bowl teams.
oh yeah,
were on the radio today at a Philly radio station. And, there's been some rumors about an altercation back whenever, they won the Super Bowl. Nick Foles led them to the Super Bowl. There's been some rumors floating around. So the guy asked, he's like, hey, what's the true story? What happened? Well, they didn't hold back. Apparently Carson Wentz was in the training room, because, torn ACL. He's in there with some other guys. One of those guys being Darren Sproles. And, he was complaining about the team's success and the fact that they were, this was before the Super Bowl. He was complaining how they were having success and going to the Super Bowl without him as the quarterback. And he was almost kind of lamenting that the team was succeeding without him. And Darren Sproles got in his face and they had to be separated. There was a huge altercation there with those guys. And LeGarrette Blount confirmed it, and Brian Mitchell's the one that actually told the story.
Who's a bigger Colts killer, Darren Sproles or Carson Wentz?
Maurice Jones-Drew.
Darren Sproles killed some Colts teams too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why I didn't like Phillip Rivers for the longest time until he played for us. Now he's one of my favorites. I sure do miss Uncle Phil. That's how bad of a place we're in right now. Is I'm longing for a 40-year-old Phillip Rivers right now. I wish he'd unretire and come back. So we also have some other trade news we'll get to. We won't spend all day on Carson Wentz for all you non-Colts fans out there listening.
I'm done with Carson Wentz.
Yeah. See, Jared's ready to move on. So
let's do that.
There's some more trade, and it goes back to the loaded AFC West division, which seems like it's just getting better and better on a daily basis, unless you are the Las Vegas Raiders, which at that point you're just hoping that there's just not another scandal. So Khalil Mack is traded from the Chicago Bears for a 2nd round pick and I believe a 6th round pick.
Yep.
To the Los Angeles Chargers. So LA adds Khalil Mack, and Chicago moves on. And the thing too is Chicago is actually having to eat the dead cap this year when they moved him. So LA's getting him at a pretty decent price before that, salary shoots up to over 17 million for the next couple of years. So with the Khalil Mack trade, we just had the Russell Wilson trade, to Denver. And then obviously we know what Kansas City constantly looks like. Now it seems like LA is loading up because they have a quarterback who is on a rookie deal making hardly, peanuts. And to me, that is one of the biggest advantages, if not the biggest advantage in sport.
It is.
You have the biggest advantage is when you have an elite, we're talking about borderline top 5 quarterback in the NFL making $3 million. And
you cannot beat that in the NFL. There is no bigger advantage.
You have to take advantage of that. And it looks like the Chargers are taking advantage of that. So I'm not as high on Khalil Mack as you guys. So I'll let you go ahead and speak first on the deal. And then I'll kind of bring up the rear, maybe, to counter some of the other stuff.
So, 2021 was, a very injury riddled season. I think he only played like 7 games, something like that. So I'm not going to talk too much about that season because I'm not going to just expect that he's going to be injured again next year. But 2020, he was, now I know that, the opinions on PFF grades vary throughout the sports industry, but he was the top graded edge defender in the NFL in 2020. So even if you don't really like their grades, they're probably not off that much to where he's like just completely fallen off and they just missed it all completely. No. And he had, I think he was tied for either 10th or 11th in pressures in 2020 as well. Had 9.5 sacks. I apologize, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I
believe it was 9.5.
So like just whenever I was reading I was kind of curious whenever the trade came through. I was like, what does Mack's numbers look like? So it's been a day since I looked at them, but yeah, I mean, I still think he is a very, very good player, great player, and well worth the picks that were given up. I think that this is a trade where it makes sense for both sides. I think the Bears realize where they are and they have to take the dead cap hit this year. But I think they acknowledge that this year probably wasn't going to be a huge year for them anyway. So they take the dead cap hit this year, frees up cap space. In the 2023 season, you hope to see that leap for Justin Fields, and then they've got some more cap space to work with, and then hopefully they can start to build around Fields with the extra cap space in 2023 and beyond. But for the Chargers, I mean, being able to put him across from Bosa, and granted, this isn't like this is the first time Khalil Mack has played with other talented players on the defensive line. He had that in Chicago as well. But whenever you've got to play Patrick Mahomes twice a year, you've now got to play Russell Wilson twice a year. It's a pretty good idea to try to find people that can get after the quarterback. So
yeah, let's not forget about Derek Carr either, who was extremely highly rated whenever it came to throws under pressure.
Yeah, Carr was solid last year as well. So his numbers don't look great last year, obviously, with the injuries that he dealt with, but I do believe that there is still plenty left in the tank for Khalil Mack. And I mean, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know how high I am on Brandon Staley as a coach. And I think that getting to play in Brandon Staley's system, I don't think it's a coincidence that they went out and got this guy. I'm sure Staley, was ready to make this move and is ready to show the world how good Khalil Mack is. So I am one that there is name value here, but I think that it is more than that. And I think that, we're going to be reminded pretty quickly how good Khalil Mack is.
Yeah, you're gonna see definitely a spike in his numbers too. The one thing with his time in Chicago, where we always forget, like on a defense, especially like if you're looking at just strictly numbers, like your offense has got to score points. So like when you got a team like the Bears that have trouble scoring points for several years now, obviously teams are going to more likely run the ball more. They're going to run clock more than anything else. Well, now he's playing with the Chargers where they have a high-powered offense that's going to put up points where teams are going to have to be forced to drop back and throw more. And now you're going to have Bosa and this guy like coming at you. Like it's going to be tough. His numbers are definitely going to come up big time.
Well, and to that point too, if your offense sucks, that means your defense is spending a lot more time on the field too. And
absolutely,
you've got the fatigue factor and things like that. Whereas the Chargers offense is a well-oiled machine, and they're going to be, the time of possession is going to be a lot more.
He's going to be in a lot less negative game stretch.
Yeah, a lot less lopsided, and he's going to be able to just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback a lot more than he did in Chicago. So I think that's something I didn't really consider. That's a great point.
Yeah, and Jared, that's actually a really great point. It's something that I also didn't consider, and it actually kind of changed my view, a little bit towards the deal. So it's not necessarily that I dislike Khalil Mack as a player. I think he's, fine player, really good player. Obviously, I think, he's not as good as he was, his first few years in Chicago with the Raiders. He's sitting there in his prime, now he's looking at, 31 years old. But I mean, I do think he still has a lot of good years left. The only issue for me is he has been banged up quite a lot here recently. He hasn't missed a ton. I mean, he missed, a pretty good portion of the season last year. But he played, in the years prior to that, but he played hurt. And it just always seems to be something, nagging him or hurting him. And I think that's kind of why his production has dropped off some. He hasn't had double-digit sacks in the last 3 seasons since his first year in Chicago. So
Yeah,
I think
he only missed double digit by like half a sack 2 years ago, though.
Yeah, but the other ones you're looking at 6 sacks, and then I think 6.5 was the other one. So I mean,
no, it was just last. It was just last year. Was
well,
the
now the year before that as well.
There's
that
a
was
guy
that was the year
sitting
he
there.
had 9.5, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a year that I think he had like 6.5, 9.5, and then 6 last year.
There's a guy right now
his
in
first
Los
year in
Angeles.
Chicago.
There's a guy right now in Los Angeles who his numbers had declined, and he was getting hurt quite a bit too. And he just won a Super Bowl and was one of the most effective players during the playoffs. And,
Oh yeah,
Von Miller.
so he had 6 sacks in 7 games last year, and then 9 sacks, 8.5 sacks, and then 12.5.
Yeah.
So it
So,
was.
I mean, but regardless, that's not necessarily the point I'm trying to make. The point is, he's just had a lot of nagging injuries here the last few years, and you wonder if all those reps and all those years have just kind of caught up with him a little bit. Now, whenever you're trading guys and you're going after guys, you never want to project injury. So
Right.
I don't necessarily want to do that, but I don't think it's quite the heist that the media might make it out to be, because I think, like Drew said, I think Chicago realized their position they're in, especially whenever their owner returns for at least another few years. He didn't retire, and he wanted to continue to purchase that franchise on a yearly basis. So I think they realized that they weren't going anywhere right now, because they got a quarterback on a rookie deal. I think maybe they want to see what they have in Justin Fields, and then possibly you have that guy on a rookie deal. Then you maybe start to build some pieces around him. And I think they got a really good coach in Eberflus. I do like Eberflus, and I'll say this though. They're moving on, with their D-line. I think Akeem Hicks is a free agent this year. They just cut Goldman, I believe, today as well, off that defensive line. And then now Khalil Mack is gone. So all of those are guys that don't necessarily fit what he wants to do on defense. So I think it's, their chance to kind of bring in some guys that fit their scheme a little bit better, as well as saving some money and getting assets as well. So I think Chicago wins this trade. I think Los Angeles also makes out really good in this trade, especially if he does stay healthy and he's right there in that division. And especially in that division, you've got 3 of the best 6 quarterbacks in football. You have to get to the quarterback. That's how it is in 2022. Los Angeles took advantage of Justin Herbert on a rookie deal. They're going to try to get to the quarterback, and we'll see if this is as good of a trade for them as I think it will be for Chicago. So
and the Chargers are still, even after this trade, they're still top 10 in most
40
cap
something
space.
million.
Yeah. So they've still got money to spend, which again, Justin Herbert's on a rookie deal. So
they also too signed Mike Williams to that huge contract as well. So that's even with that taken into account.
Yeah. So I mean, they've still, and I mean, they had a lot of trouble stopping the run last year. So it'll be interesting to see whether it's the draft.
Even though the sack even though the sack numbers aren't there, I will give Khalil Mack this: is he is an absolutely elite level run stopper.
And they need
They
that.
could not stop
way.
anything last year.
Yeah, they need that in a bad way. So it'll be interesting to see, what they do with the money they have and then the draft capital they have. I think they have a really good opportunity, and it sucks for the Chargers because of how tough this division is. I think it's, it was pretty much across the board. The NFC West was the toughest division in football prior to this offseason. And now I think it's, even before this Khalil Mack trade, this just adds to it. Once Russell Wilson was traded to the AFC West, I think it's pretty safe to say this is now the toughest division in football easily. So I know, we haven't made it through. Free agency hasn't started yet. The draft hasn't happened yet. But right now, if you had to pick somebody to win this division, with how loaded these 3 teams are at the top, assuming nobody's going to say the Raiders, who would you throw a dart at to say is going to win the division?
Well, look, for me, until Kansas City proves that they can't win the division, I have to go with Kansas City.
Yeah, it's tough to argue against that. And they're the only team, they franchise tagged Orlando Brown, but they let Honey Badger walk. They franchise tagged their left tackle, and then they pretty much status quo with all these other teams are making moves, and we're all sitting here still saying it's probably the Chiefs.
That's what having a guy like Patrick Mahomes does for you. And I think
Andy Reid is the reason why I picked them to win the West. I
Yeah.
think he's
Well,
the
I
best
mean,
coach.
and that's it because I think Justin Herbert is a lot closer to Patrick Mahomes than what a lot of people want to admit. Because I think the media is finally kind of starting to show him a little love, but the media is just always, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes. And so I think a lot of people just kind of like go with that thinking, but I think they're a lot closer than what people really honestly want to admit. And I mean, I think if they shore up just a few things, I think they're going to be right there with Kansas City. And then that's not even talking about the Denver Broncos. Which, I mean,
Yeah, Russell Wilson or Russell to me is the best quarterback in that division. Like I think he's better than Mahomes.
I don't know about that.
I can't. I love.
I can't
Russell
go there,
Wilson.
and I love
Russell
Russ,
Wilson fan, but I can't go that high either. But
I think
I'm curious to see how Nathaniel Hackett does. That's kind of I don't really. I don't know a lot about him, just to be completely.
Let me tell you this: he's very, very, very highly regarded within NFL. Like kind of just how like Brandon Staley was very highly regarded in NFL circles with the defense. It's almost kind of the same thing on the opposite side of the ball.
Okay, so I mean, like it's gonna be tough not to be high on the Broncos. Because
this is gonna be the first time Russell Wilson's actually gonna see what it's like to play for a coach who can actually scheme guys open. Where like he's gonna be looking at the guy and he's just gonna be wide open. It's like, what the hell is going on?
Hope you guys taking running backs. Like Javonte Williams is gonna go pretty quick next year.
Yeah, and speaking of the Chargers, I know Drew's gonna like this, but there's also some news as well that Melvin Gordon and the Chargers have mutual interest in reuniting. So I know Drew's got his fingers crossed.
Please, just anywhere but Denver. I don't care where you go, man. Just don't go back to Denver. Please, let Russ cook and unleash Javonte, and all will be well.
It's coming. I have a feeling
this division is going to be a lot of it should be like a requirement that every division game from the AFC West should be on prime time this year. Like just slot them all in prime time. Like, every single one's going to be must see TV. So that's going to be a lot of fun. What sucks too
is the Colts actually play the AFC West this year.
Oh no!
Yes, we got the NFC West last year. We get the AFC West this year.
Jesus Christ! Why does the NFL schedule makers hate the Colts? My column.
Yeah, something I've been asking myself for years.
It's brutal.
Yeah, so now that we've kind of touched on the big trade news that happens, and I'm sure we're going to be touching on more big trade news here in the next few days as well. In between that, we wanted to wait for Jared to join us. That way we have a full crew. But the NFL Combine happens, and we're going to give you we each have 3 winners and 3 losers from the NFL Combine. Now we'll preface this by saying that how guys perform in shorts isn't necessarily how we think they're going to perform in the actual NFL when the pads come on. But there are some takeaways that you can take away from the Combine, and we're going to give you our biggest takeaways. We're going to have 3 winners and 3 losers. So I want to start at the top here. I want to go ahead and shoot it off to Andrew. So give us your 3 winners.
Yeah, so just to preface this, and I think you said it perfectly, that this should not be – I don't think any player should take a drastic leap or a drastic drop just based off the Combine. It is important. I do think it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's only a piece. There's still the tape, the years of work that they put in college. But I think it's a good thing to use for like breaking ties or being able to like better tier players, things like that. It shouldn't be something where like, oh, this guy was going to go number 1 overall, but he had a bad combine, so now he's going to drop out of the first round. There should be don't overreact to the NFL Combine. No.
I'll say this too, along with that point, how the guys do the drills and how they look in shorts. That's not even the most important part of the Combine. The most important part of why people and why coaches and scouts love the Combine so much is because they get to sit down with these guys.
The interviews. Yeah.
The interviews are the most important part of the Combine, and that can't be overstated. And obviously we're not necessarily privy to those private conversations for the most part. I mean, there is stuff that leaks out.
Yeah. We get to see what you guys get to see in terms of what's reported.
Yeah. And then, we hear certain things as well on a different level that some of you might not hear because, we talk to some different people, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything as well, because especially coming out of the combine
Smoke
and the interviews,
screens, man.
the smoke screens run wild. Like, oh,
Yeah.
so-and-so doesn't like this guy. So-and-so said this guy interviewed bad. They're just trying to get him to drop down to their pick. That's what some of that is. So you're never necessarily going to know the truth unless you're one of the, 5 guys in the room while that interview is going on. And obviously we are not, or else we'd be making a lot more money. But that being said, you can have a few takeaways from how guys perform when they
Yes.
do the drills. So go ahead, kick us off, Drew.
Yeah, so that's kind of a great segue for my first winner, because I haven't heard anything bad about his interviews. But Desmond Ridder, quarterback from Cincinnati, I was already leaning on him being quarterback 1 for me prior to the combine, and then that combine kind of just gave me the extra push that I needed. He came in 4 pounds heavier than he did at the Senior Bowl. He's at 211 pounds. And even at 211 pounds, the man ran a 4.52, had a 36-inch vertical, and a 10'7" broad jump. So you combine the athletic measurables with the tape, with his athletic ability, like just on the field, his actual on the field speed, seeing him in pads, with the versatility that he has, and then the accuracy that he shows. You can have like Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, Malik Willis. Those guys are fine. They're fun. Malik Willis is a lot of fun. Desmond Ridder for me is that he's my guy for this quarterback class. He's the one that kind of I've been following most closely too. So maybe there's a little bit of bias there where I've kind of had my eye on him since last year. That he was the guy that I was most excited about for this class. But he's done nothing to sway me any other way. It just seems like every year he's improved, which is something that, like, how can you not like that?
Yeah.
And there's from what was reported for the interviews he had, and then the interviews he had with the media that I've listened to, what he put on tape, what he put in the measurables. I haven't seen much talk about him being the first quarterback off the board, but I just can't really find a reason why he shouldn't be.
Well, so to go to that point, a reason why a lot of teams don't have him as first is because he does have some fundamental issues as far as, the way he sets his base. He did have some accuracy issues in college, and I think that's kind of scared some teams. I know he has been working with Jordan Palmer, Carson Palmer's younger brother. He's fantastic quarterback coach, trains a lot of really pro guys. And so he has been working with him this offseason and getting ready for the draft. They've, wanted to clean up kind of a small wind-up issue in his release. I think that showed up to me most notably at the combine when he did throw. I didn't see near as much of a wind-up in his release. And just, setting his base, not going to hitch steps. He had some problems, 3-5 step drops where he would kind of hitch a little bit with his foot. He'd kind of get a little happy feet underneath him and he would miss some throws. So I know they're working on that, but all that stuff to me is very correctable.
Right, exactly.
And I think if he continues to work, and nothing has shown me that he won't, which is why I love him so much, because the guy, from everybody that I've heard from, and this is actually from people that are really tied in to some of the interviews, this guy is one of the premier leaders, maybe just not even in college, maybe in football in general. Teammates gravitate towards him. They want to play for him. He gets the most out of the guys he's with. They love him, and he's an extremely bright guy, extremely smart when it comes to breaking down film, able to watch. He just grinds constantly. And I know that's just kind of like a weird term to use, but I mean, whenever you talk about guys watching film, you talk about them grinding film. This guy loves to do that. And that's a really great path to succeed in the NFL. And like you said, he's a guy that's improved every year. And I think all that stuff shows up whenever you watch it. All the little things that don't necessarily show up in the stat sheet, it shows up, every year he's gotten better. And I think it's just going to continue in the NFL. And that's not even counting the athleticism where he tested off the charts.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I'm a huge Desmond Ridder guy. If you couldn't tell, he's my personal favorite quarterback. I think I have him ranked 4th out of the quarterbacks I've watched right now. But for me personally, I like him more than all the other ones. And a lot of that has to do with the intangibles that he shows.
Yeah, I was between Ridder and Malik Willis for quarterback 1 for this class for me. And then Pickett was right there as well. But those were the 2 guys that I was trying to decide between. And so I ended up landing on Ridder. That's the guy for me.
You're right though on Willis, though, man. He could put on a show.
Yeah, he could be a lot. I mean, he obviously, has a lot to work on as well, but
Yeah,
that dude could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
another guy that won the combine as well.
Yeah, and senior, he was all the talk at the Senior Bowl too, and just took that
Yeah.
momentum to the combine. I mean, he should be I don't know if any of us had him circled as a winner, but he should definitely be an honorable mention.
Yeah, I think too from some stuff I'm hearing as well. There's a good chance he doesn't make it out of the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, with Carolina, now the Seahawks being in the top 10 after that trade for Russ, there's a few teams, and then even the possibility of a trade up. I do think, like, even though Ritter's quarterback one for me, I think Malik Willis is the first quarterback off the board. I think
the Lions are a team to watch for Malik Willis.
Maybe if they trade back, I don't think.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't necessarily know, where they're picking at now, but I think in a possible trade back scenario where they think they can get him at later, the Lions really, really like Malik Willis.
If they can trade back, I think that makes sense. I don't think he goes at 2.
So, but let's move on.
We all know the Lions are gonna take a tight end, man.
They better not. It's one of the few holes they don't have. They better not do that.
We'll see how that works out. I mean,
and speaking of week,
hey, their coach, a former tight end, so maybe
there you go.
Yeah.
But so I know you got 2 more guys you want to touch on as well, Drew.
Oh, you want me to keep going?
Yeah. Run through your 3, and then I'll let Jared do his 3, and I'll end mine.
Okay. So the next one I have up is this one is pretty obvious, but it's Breece Hall, running back 1 of this class, and I think that's pretty much unanimous at this point after the combine. It was between him and Kenneth Walker for me, the running back from Michigan State. Those are the 2 guys that I was trying to decide between. There's something about Isaiah Spiller, man, that where I like what I saw on tape, but I don't know. I ended up liking Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker more. And even though Kenneth Walker had a fine combine himself, Breece Hall just he left no doubt. I mean, a 4.39 yard, 40-yard dash, was the largest running back to run a sub 4.4 at 217 pounds. And then he has the pass catching ability, and Walker, that was kind of what separated it for me. Once I saw the testing measurables, Kenneth Walker only had it was less than a 5% target percentage at Michigan State last year. And so I think Breece Hall is better set up to be a 3-down back. And I think he's on that late first round watch now after what he had in the combine. And I'm typically not somebody that says I wouldn't draft a running back with the top 5, top 10 pick, but teams at the back of the first round that don't have a lot of holes in their roster that can afford to draft a running back, I am a fan of teams doing that, because you get that extra year of control. You get that 5th-year option where you can get 5 years out of a running back before you cut them loose, because, we #never pay running back. So if you do find somebody that you believe is an elite prospect at the position, and you don't have, other huge holes or other guys on your board that are way above whoever your top running back is, I am a fan of teams at the back of the first grabbing the running back 1 off the board so that you can get 5 years out of them before letting somebody else overpay for him. So I think he should be on the watch for that area. I don't know if it happens. I still think there's a pretty good chance the first running back doesn't come off the board until early 2nd round. But I would be shocked at this point with what he put on tape combined with his combine if it wasn't Breece Hall.
Yeah, I'm fully driving the Breece Hall to Buffalo.
Yeah, my whole late first round spiel, that was basically just a Buffalo needs to draft Breece Hall spiel. That's all that was.
Another spot too, early in 2nd round, I think Atlanta could take a hard look at him as well.
There's a lot of teams that enter the conversation if he doesn't get drafted in the first. Yeah,
I don't think he will. I don't think he's a first round guy, but I do think a team could be had in a possible trade back, like if you are a Buffalo or somebody like that, trade back into the early. The early 2nd, for one of these teams that does a guy like a Desmond Ridder that wants that 5th-year control for one of these quarterbacks like Matt Corral, Desmond Ridder, possibly Kenny Pickett if he ends up falling a little bit. Some of these teams will trade up into that late first round just to get that 5th-year control on a quarterback. And I think some of the teams can take advantage of that.
Jared, anything you want to add on Brees before I move on?
No. If he goes to Buffalo, he won't see the ball. They don't run the football at all. Actually, Devin Singletary, he was really good towards the end of the year, but that would make sense. So going to like a team like the Bills would make the most sense. But I could see second round as well, falling into the second.
Yeah, I think second makes more sense. But the last guy for me is Sky Moore, wide receiver, who ran a 4.4140, 125 broad jump, and he had 10 and a quarter inch hands, which is the largest hands of any wide receiver at the combine. He's 5'10", like just under 200 pounds. But with those athletic measurables combined with the fact that the dude's he breaks tackles like nobody's business. I think he led the FBS in broken tackles last year. Like he's just a big play waiting to happen. Sure hands.
You know what they say about big hands.
What's that?
And you catch balls.
Okay, I didn't know if you were going somewhere weird with that, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to do it. Yeah, so this is a guy that I've been rising on a lot as of late. He wasn't, on my radar as like one of the top, like the obvious top, the Drake Londons, the two receivers from Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, those guys, like those were the obvious ones. And as I was looking at some of the other receivers in this deep receiver class, he was one that that stuck out. And then there's, I've got a love for players from Memphis, apparently, because Calvin Austin's another one that should be an honorable mention as well. That dude's a freak as well. This is a really good year to need a wide receiver. I don't think there's like a Jamar Chase level, like top clear number one guy, but the depth in this class is just insane.
Just to piggyback off that, I believe I have 10 wide receivers ranked in my top 50 players right now. So, and that only rivals the 2020 class. I think I had 11 guys in my top 50.
Yeah, it's nuts. The depth is crazy, but Sky Moore is a guy I feel like needs to be talked about. I just hope he lands in a situation where a team that knows how to use him correctly, gets him so that we can really see him flourish. Because I think as long as that happens, the dude is going to make a huge impact.
Yeah. So, Jared, I know you have 3 winners from the combine as well. Go ahead and give us the guys that caught your eye.
I got 3 here. Let's see. Jordan Davis from Georgia, defensive tackle.
Jesus Christ.
That was the winner of the combine. Like there was no doubt we were talking about him today.
Yeah.
So
what a freak.
He destroyed the combine, man. He went crazy. He's huge too, 6'6", 340. That's massive. There's so much to say about it. It's likely he'll go late in the first round, but man, he's primed. Like I feel like he stood out more than anyone else. And then Jelani.
So what were some of his like numbers that like, what made him win the combine?
Well, he ran a 4.78 in the 40, and I'm trying to figure out. His broad jump was a 10.3. Like he looked crazy, man.
So that 4.78 too, just to kind of put that into perspective, no one over 340 pounds has ever run a 40 faster than a 4.98. He ran a 4.78.
Yeah, and so here's the thing too with me. I believe he had a 1.68 10-yard split, which is just like so much explosion for a guy like 6'6", 340. Like that guy was just absolutely insane. And like you said, he was projected to go, late first round for a team like that. I think he solidly brought himself into that mid-range for a team like Philadelphia.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of him to Philadelphia post combine.
Yeah, that guy made himself a pretty good penny there. What a freak.
Yeah, he definitely stole the whole combine. And then I'm gonna butcher a bunch of names, man. Jelani Woods.
Yes. Yep, Jelani.
He's a tight end from Virginia. he's 6'7", 259 pounds. He turns the numbers. 40-yard dash was like 4.61. Dude bench pressed 24 reps. Man, he's a monster. This guy's a freak. He's like a physical freak. Like tight ends, like I was joking about Detroit, but like they could use some more weapons. There's a lot of teams like I'm not sure exactly where he's going to fall in the draft. But he's like a crazy specimen, man.
Yeah, I think he was projected more of like a 4th, 5th round flyer guy. I think you might see a team reach up into like the 3rd round and kind of snag him, because he was one of the guys that like you would watch the combine and you would just see this absolute behemoth out there, and then he would outrun everybody, and then he would outbench everybody. And I believe he also had 34-inch arms too. So it's not like he's benching these numbers, with short arms, where, he doesn't have as far up to go and as far down to go when he's bench pressing. I mean, this guy is strong. He's fast. He's 6'7". Like that guy is huge. And, he's got all the tools to work with. And you would watch the film, like at least when I watched film on him, I know I'm a little more well-versed in film than you guys are right now at this point, because you're still doing your evals, but you would watch the film and it never really showed up until this last year. I believe he caught 8 touchdowns this last year. So a team could use a guy like that in the red zone, and then, to stretch the field up the seam. He's going to take some time, as all tight ends do. But I think if the right team gets him in the right system and the right coaching, this guy is just an absolute like physical monster.
Yeah, like they can. The way he runs routes too is definitely something that, like you talk about stretching the field, he can definitely do that for sure. I wanted to bring up a loser actually. Like I don't know if Drew got a chance to really talk.
No, we're not doing that. I think we got 3 winners and 3 losers. So did you get a 3rd guy in there for your winners?
Yeah, Tyreek Woolen. He's a cornerback from Texas, San Antonio. I have to throw in that part.
Yeah,
too.
one of them small schools. Yeah.
I was reading my notes here and I was like, Texas. Oh, it's Texas, San Antonio. 6'4", 205 pounds. He ran a 4.26 in the 40 dash, and he has a 42-inch vertical. That is pretty impressive. But man, there's just a lot of good things that can. So he was converted cornerback from wide receiver as well, which anymore I feel like that's a very important thing in today's NFL.
Yeah, they say corners can't catch, but if you used to play wideout, you can probably catch too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that too. I mean, like, if if you do usually convert, you're probably not necessarily as well versed in cornerback yet. So if you put numbers like that up, you generally have a lot of room to grow at the cornerback position if you're a converted wide receiver. I think Richard Sherman is, the most famous guy when it comes to that. Wide receiver at Stanford, was just kind of a middle of the pack guy. He converts the cornerback, gets drafted in the 5th round because, he was just very green at the position. And then we see kind of what he grew into as well. So not necessarily saying that guy's going to be, Richard Sherman, but you never know. But I mean, what'd you say he was, like 6'4", 205? And
yeah, that vertical
ran a 4.26 with a 42-inch vertical.
Yeah,
that's nutty. And speed's important at the cornerback position. It's not everything, but it's important.
Wow. Yeah. All right.
You want to do your winners, Lane?
Yeah, I'll go through, give you some of my winners as well. So first guy I do want to touch on is a guy that I think right behind Jordan Davis. He won the combine for me, and pretty much you say that just about any Georgia guy at this point at the combine, because Georgia absolutely demolished. But that is Travon Walker out of Georgia. We're talking about a guy that, everybody's talking about Aiden Hutchinson going first, and then behind him, it was pretty much, David Ajabo,
Kayvon
Thibodeau, Boye Mafe. After this performance, I'm not convinced that, he doesn't get taken over Thibodeau. I mean, we'll see, what happens, but I mean, this guy was extremely explosive. So this guy's 272 pounds, ran a 4.51. That is wild. Had a 6.89 3-cone and a 4.32 shuttle times, which are both, they're just explosion at that position. That edge is one of the main calling cards. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, those guys aren't going to be running 40 yards down the field. So you look at kind of the short area explosion whenever you're, watching these guys, and he just has insane burst. And at 272, I don't necessarily know what his height was just off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up real quick here. 6'5", 272. And to have that 3-cone time and that, that 4.32 shuttle time as well. And, you run a 4.51. So like I said, you're not gonna be running 40 yards down the field, but in order to run a 4.51, you got to get off the line pretty quick at that size. I mean, we're talking about just that guy's another, like in the mold of a Jordan Davis, like that guy's a freak. So I'm not quite sure if he didn't just pop himself into the top 10, maybe the second pass rusher edge defender taken in the draft. So that's a guy that.
But before you move on from him, I will say that 6.89 3-cone is probably the biggest part of that. I believe Josh Norris from Underdog that posted there's a list of all the players that had a sub, all the edge rushers that a sub 6.9 3-cone, and the list is just full of impact players in the league. I do still think he comes in behind Hutchinson and Thibodeau, but I think he, at least for me, he is firmly the third edge rusher that's going to be coming off the board.
What a fantastic performance. Another guy I wanted to touch on, probably honestly my favorite player in this draft, to be honest, because we all know I like big dudes who are quick and then can move people. You're talking about Zion Johnson, the guard out of Boston College. So whenever you would watch the film, and especially when you watch the Senior Bowl tape, the guy was just demolishing guys. I mean, he's nasty, he's big, plays with an attitude very similar to kind of like a Quentin Nelson type guy. With the way he plays as far as the attitude and the way he wants to impose his will on you, and that all showed up on tape. So everybody's kind of looking, is like, well, this guy's just been a monster at the Senior Bowl. This guy was a monster at Boston College. What's he gonna test like? So just to put this into perspective, the guy's 312 pounds. He put up a 32-inch vertical at 312 pounds and benched 32 reps. Also had a 7.38 3-cone, which for a guy that size is wild. So you're talking about a guy who's probably not only the strongest guy in the class, but one of the quickest in short area explosion. And all of that just completely shows up when you put on Boston College tape. And, they always say you can find a guard later on in the draft. You talk about 3rd, 4th round guards. I think this guy doesn't make it out of the first. For me,
I was going to say he's definitely not making it out of the second. So I'm glad you said first.
This is a guy that you look like if he doesn't, if he makes it to the end of the first round, you're looking at a team like Cincinnati that jumps all over this guy. Because I can tell you what, with that guy, not only does he bring the skill and, like I said, the explosion, the strength, but he's a guy that's similar to how Quentin Nelson was drafted to Indianapolis. He changes the culture on that offensive line. He makes every guy on that offensive line nastier. He makes them better. He makes them want to block. And I think Cincinnati would be, to me, like that's one of my dream draft spots for him, is to go to Cincinnati and protect Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I would love that. That's a great landing spot.
Yeah. And so my next guy here.
This is my favorite one of yours, if I remember correctly, from whenever we were talking before the show.
So, well, which one do you think I'm which way do you think I'm going? Because I've got like a list of like quite a few guys here.
Christian Watson.
It is Christian Watson.
Yeah.
So this is Christian Watson, the Division II guy out of North Dakota State. So this guy's 6'4", 208 pounds, just absolutely annihilated the competition over at North Dakota State, which a lot of those guys do because that's such a great Ram program there. But everybody's wondering as well, kind of the same thing with Zion Johnson, where it's like, well, this guy shows up on tape. It is Division II. How's he test? So 6'4", 208 pounds. Guy goes out and runs a 4.36 in the 40-yard dash. Has a 38.5-inch vertical. And to me, what is the craziest thing out of all of this, an 11'4" broad jump. So you're talking about extreme explosion in the lower half of his body. And that's extreme. Like the broad jump to me is what you look at wide receivers when you look at how guys can explode and get off the line of scrimmage. And that shows up on tape because he would just, explode off the line. And then he's got that 4 point, that sub 4.40 to where once he gets past you, you're generally not catching him. And to do that at 6'4" as a guy who can high point the ball, just absolutely, yeah, that's elite side type of numbers for a wide receiver. And he's a guy that also he blew up at the Senior Bowl. So these are all guys like with Zion Johnson. These are all guys that showed it at the Senior Bowl. So there were some questions. Hey, Division II, does it show up against guys with, that can compete at, a higher level? And he went out there and really turned some heads at the Senior Bowl too. I don't necessarily think he sneaks in the round one. I still think he's more of like a late second, maybe third round guy going in the 40s and 50s would kind of be my ceiling for him right now. But if a team falls in love with him, in the pre-draft setting and the pro day, and, they get a little more, this is a guy that I would be scared if I'm in the AFC West, if Kansas City took a guy like this.
Oh my God.
That's a guy that terrifies me if Kansas City lands him, because right now, with Tyreek Hill, you have Travis Kelce, but that second wide receiver position has kind of been a sore spot for them for the last 2-3 years. I think this is a guy that can come in and Andy Reid would immediately know how to deploy him. And you're looking at, just pick your poison at that point. Because with him and Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill's a little smaller than 6'4", but I mean, this guy, that would scare me if I'm an AFC West team and he sneaks into the back half of the first round.
I think it could even be a second round pick too, with how deep this class is. Like,
that's where I fully
NFL
expect him.
Are gonna,
I fully expect him to be a second rounder in my eyes. I don't know if it's going to be mid to late, but like I said, these things are always fluid, and a team could fall in love with him. And but this is I think to his detriment a little bit. This is just such a deep wide receiver class.
Yeah,
that there's going to be so many guys go in that area. So those are my 3 winners from the draft. If you have a chance, go watch any of the 9 guys that we all, have watched and given you. Go watch some film on them and let us know what you think in the comments.
Yeah, that would be great.
Also pivot to some losers of the combine. And like we said before, you don't necessarily lose the combine unless just something drastic happens, but these are guys that didn't necessarily perform up to expectations of where people thought they were going to perform. So like we did last time, Drew, you kicked us off with the winners. Go ahead and kick us off with your losers.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, because this isn't talking about losers isn't near as fun as talking about winners. So I'm just going to run through these. The first one for me, he was teetering on that running back 3 territory. I talked about Breece Hall was running back 1, Kenneth Walker running back 2. This guy was kind of fighting with Isaiah Spiller for me as running back 3, and I just could not get over what I saw at the combine, and that's Kyron Williams, the running back from Notre Dame. He only weighed in at 194 pounds, and he still ran the slowest 40-yard dash of any running back. Only had a 32-inch vertical and a 9'8" broad jump. Those are pretty rough figures, and then they're even worse whenever they're weight adjusted for his 194 pounds that he weighed in at. So that's rough, man. That's tough to get over. So, he's probably going to be in that running back 4, running back 5 territory for me, as opposed to running back 3. And I haven't finished looking at every running back yet either. There are still some, there's some other running backs like Zamir White from Georgia, who's probably going to be a 2-down back at best, but I haven't gotten through all of his stuff yet either. And a few that's just one guy to throw out there that I know that I like some of the stuff that I saw. I mean, he's got a lot of injury concerns, but there's a few running backs that I'm really interested to look into that could possibly leapfrog Kyron Williams. So that was a guy that stuck out to me. Another one that had an opportunity to climb a little bit that did not was Cole Turner, the tight end from Nevada. He only ran a 4.76 40-yard dash and a 27-inch vertical. And those are only rough athletic testing numbers because the tight end from UCLA, Greg Dulcich, I believe is, I don't want to butcher his last name. No, he's 2 or 3. Trey McBride is tied at 1. He posted much better numbers though, and those guys are similar, similar archetypes. But so for him to get outclassed by those tight ends around him, I think you've got Trey McBride, you've got Dulcich, and you've got the tight end from Texas A&M as well, Wademeyer. Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah, and then you also have, guy Jared mentioned here in his winners.
Yeah, exactly. So, Cole Turner, was kind of a victim of not testing that well, and then having those around him in the same position testing pretty well as well. And there's not a Kyle Pitts in this class, but I do think there is some good depth to be found at the tight end position. And I don't think there's going to be a tight end drafted in the first round, but there's going to be some second, third round picks that are going to be really valuable at the tight end position though. And
that's what I was going to piggyback off of there. Yeah, that's what I was going to piggyback off of is you don't have that, TJ Hawkinson, you don't have that Kyle Pitts in this class, but you've got about 10 dudes that, for me, it's more of like back into the second, for me, it's more third, fourth round guys.
Yeah.
That you're going to be looking here in 2 or 3 years, and they can be some really productive NFL players, and they all have different skill sets. So you have move tight ends, you have blocking tight ends, you have possession tight ends. They all do something well, but there's just not that one guy that can give you elite production in like every area. So this is a very deep tight end class, but it just doesn't stand out, because you just don't have that one guy. But like I said, there's going to be some great value for a lot of teams in that third, fourth round for some of these tight ends.
Right. My last loser is kind of the opposite of the winner that Jared pointed out with Tariq Woolen and his blazing speed at the cornerback position. This guy was pretty much the exact opposite. That's Jermaine Waller, the cornerback from Virginia Tech, who only ran a 4.68 40-yard dash. Again, speed is not everything at corner, but that's tough, man. Like that's tough to get past, and that's tough to fit into NFL schemes with speed, with that slow of a 40 at that position. So
especially with these wide receivers out here running 4.
Yeah, every wide receiver running was breaking the record. So whenever you come out and run that slow, that's a tough hurdle to get past. So that definitely did not do himself any favors. But again, got to preface this though, those are my 3 losers. But again, do not completely overreact to the combine. If you would have done that, we would have missed a lot of teams would have missed out on Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was, he had a bad combine, but he put a lot of great stuff on tape at Florida State. And, whenever he's on the field, he turns out he's a pretty good running back. So
it's like it's
not everything. These guys aren't doing these drills in pads. This, so it does matter, but it's not the make or break though.
Yeah. It's what we always say here is watch the film. That
is more important. 100%.
And that's prefacing a guy that I'm going to talk to here in just a second. But I know Jared also has 3 losers on his list, and guys that he, you go into the combine, like we said before, you think they're going to test better than what they actually do. So Jared, what's that looking like for you?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off Drew, who's talking about speed, Treylon Burks, wide receiver, Arkansas. He ran a pedestrian 4.55 in the 40 dash. His vertical is only 33. I don't know. His numbers don't match up with film. He's still expected to go in the top half, but I don't know. I felt like he had a pretty-pedestrian combine.
And like for him, before you move on for him, this was the number one guy that I am trying my best not to let the combine numbers affect how I feel, because for me, like Drake London is wide receiver 1 in this class for me, but Treylon Burks was right there at wide receiver 2 with Garrett Wilson.
I'm a Garrett Wilson guy.
Yeah, I like Garrett Wilson a lot as well. And I mean, Jamison Williams, obviously he's there too, but he has the torn ACL, but I still think he should be in the discussion for like a top 3 wide receiver. But Treylon Burks was the guy that after the combine, I was like, I cannot forget what I saw on the field, because like the 40 didn't really concern me as much because the dude's like 230 pounds damn near. So 4.55 really isn't that bad for a guy that size, but the vertical and the broad jump, that is a little concerning. But so that's a guy that I'm definitely going to have to dig into a little bit more to try to figure out how I really feel about him, because this is a very deep receiver class, as we've already said multiple times. And he was the guy pre-combine I was very high on. So I'm going to have to really get to the truth and figure out how I feel about that guy. I think it's a great name to bring up though. Even though we don't need to let the combine completely affect how we feel. It does bring up question marks. It does bring up curiosity of digging deeper, into a player. And I think he's a perfect example of that. Cause after the combine, I was like, how do I were my eyes lying to me?
Yeah, you and a lot of people have that.
So he's got great hands.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
he does. And honestly, like I don't think his speed is bad for how big he is.
No, because it
but
never showed up on film. So, and the thing too with this, so he just had his pro day as well here. I believe it was yesterday, and the
I
numbers
haven't
were
even seen that.
yeah. So the numbers were similar to the combine. There wasn't hardly any change. So that, I mean, that's just who he is athletically. But when, like you said, when you watch the film, man, like none of that shows up on tape. Like the guy's just an absolute baller. And if I had to stake my claim as, one guy that I think will be successful at the wide receiver position in this draft class, he would be right at the top of that list with, 2-3 other guys.
Right.
So yeah, like Jared said,
it's definitely the way you preface this is these are guys that did not test how they expected, and Treylon Burks absolutely. Like the 40 isn't as big of a deal, but those other testing numbers, the broad jump, the vertical, things like that, those weren't numbers that you were expecting to see from a guy like that.
Yeah. So Jared, you got another name for us here.
Yeah, offensive tackle Max Mitchell. He came in. He's just undersized, and I don't know. He's got little dinosaur arms or something. He's got small arms compared. Like it's just weird looking, but definitely, I just don't see it or through the combine so far. I didn't catch on that. And then Carson Strong, the quarterback.
Well, what were some testing numbers that he put up?
Well, he ran a 5.32 in a 40-yard dash, and he I don't know. That's really all I got on him.
He had an 8.09 second three cone as well, which I think might be the most concerning thing for him. As a guy that's kind of undersized, you would expect probably to have a faster three cone, which is a pretty good telltale for offensive linemen, how they can get around. For him to run a three cone of 8.09, it's not great.
Yeah, especially being like his size. I mean, he was already undersized to begin with for the offensive tackle position. So, usually when you're undersized, you can kind of alleviate some of those concerns when you're an elite athlete at that offensive tackle position. But he was everything but an elite athlete at the combine.
Yeah,
so,
like it's all right to be undersized if you're athletic, and it's all right to, if you're bigger, you might be able to not be as athletic. But if you're undersized and
not athletic,
it's tough, man.
You got an uphill climb, man.
Oh yeah.
And so I think you mentioned
it's gonna be tough for him.
Yeah. So I think I believe you mentioned a quarterback just a second ago.
Carson Strong from Nevada.
Okay, Nevada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his health is an undermining issue, which we can't always base everything off previous injuries. But he definitely could still sneak in the first, second round. He's got a big arm, but his accuracy was pretty off. I like Carson Strong actually, but I don't know. There's some definite signs from the combine that are kind of alarming on him.
Yeah, and for me, like whenever I watched the combine as well, that was a guy that I also was very interested in because you hear about the knee injury he had with the medicals and stuff like that, and supposedly it's clean, and so you would. We don't necessarily know the medicals and how they test at the combine medically wise, but it was a big question going into the combine. And whenever I watched him throw with the other quarterbacks, it just seemed like he lacked, I guess, control would be a little bit of a better word for me. He seemed to just want to keep firing stuff in, like even with, the touch throws, it seemed like he just didn't really have much touch. Like it was just firing balls in, and we all know he has a huge arm, probably the best arm in the class. And for me, like if you can't throw a touch, you can't throw with that, anticipation. He got away with a lot of stuff, I think, in college that you're not necessarily going to be able to get away with in the NFL. Right. And I think, unless he cleans some of that up. But I think you said it best too. Like he's still a guy I think you could sneak into like the end of the first, into that second round quarterback conversation. So I think you put it, really well there.
Thanks.
I mean, that was all good stuff. So I guess that'll bring me down to my losers. And it pains me to do this one because he's one of my favorite players in the draft as well. It's a guy that I've been high. I know Andrew and I have probably spoken on him here on the show before as well. And that is David Bell the wide receiver from Purdue. He's another guy. It's kind of similar to Jared's Treylon Burks thing, where you turn on the tape and it just doesn't match up with what you saw at the combine. So if you are on Twitter, there's an account. It's called @MathBomb. His name is Kent Lee Platt, and he does something called a RAS score, which is custom relative athletic score. He basically has a composite grade for all the metrics. So you're talking about size grade, explosion, speed, agility. He combines all that into one number, and it's graded 1 through 10. So for example, David Bell, he had a 33-inch vertical, a broad jump of only 9'10", which was not good. Weighed in at 212 pounds, ran a 4.65 with a 1.62 10-yard split, which is not that great, and a 7.14 3-cone. All that, his RAS score ended up being a 2.72, which that would rank him 1,862 out of 2,557 wide receivers. And those scores go all the way back to 1987. So, yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about like, a guy that was, I won't say historically bad, but it doesn't bode well athletically. But when you turn on the film, you don't see it.
No, he looks as natural as it gets.
I mean, he's so smooth, high points the ball, great hands, absolutely fantastic route runner. But those scores worried a lot of people at the combine from what I talked, from guys that I've talked to. And I think he was firmly in the second round wide receivers. He was going to be one of those second round guys drafted. There's some guys now that I think have pushed him down to that third round on their boards. So you could possibly see a guy like that fall into the third round. And at that point, I still think it's a value because you watch it. Like I said, we watch the film, and none of that shows up on film. He has great film, and he's been very productive in his career there at Purdue. So that's just a guy that worried me. And as well, Drew touched on him actually a little bit ago, and that was Isaiah Spiller. So Isaiah Spiller, let me pull up my notes here because I was on David Bell. So Isaiah Spiller, running back, Drew said it earlier as well. Let's see here. Where's my notes at? So yeah, he's running back out of Texas A&M. He, was good size, 6 foot, 217, posted a 30-inch vertical and a 9.6 broad jump, which for a running back, that's not great indicator as far as your explosive. And he didn't even run a 40-yard dash. So the good news is for him that his agent said he will be running his pro day, which is in 2 weeks, which was 2 weeks. So probably about, 10 days out or so from that, maybe a little bit less than that. So he has a chance to correct that and to kind of prove that, the injury didn't necessarily ruin, what we thought his stock would be as far as his athleticism, because he did have some injury concerns as well. But the explosion just wasn't there, and it's just really hard to get past that at the wide receiver position or the running back position. And I'm not a huge running back guy anyway, but I think that's a guy, possibly now you're looking at in the 4th round. So that's just kind of where I fall on Isaiah Spiller, which I know, Drew, you touched on him as well. Do you want to touch on Isaiah Spiller any?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's still running back 3 for me, just for the combination of size and the fact that he has shown that he can catch the ball as well. So the potential to be a 3-down back is there. But the combine definitely isn't what you were hoping to see from him. But at least as far as I'm concerned, the guy I was kind of teetering with to decide if I wanted to put him 3 or 4 was my loser, Kyron Williams. So I probably will still have Spiller over him, just because Spiller does have the typical size that you want to see that Kyron Williams lacks a little bit. So, but I do agree though that those were 2 guys that did disappoint and made my 1 and 2 rankings of Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker quite a bit easier to cement,
right,
with those results. So yeah, it's a little disappointing for sure.
Yeah. So, like I said, the good news for him is he does still have a pro day to go, and we can see if any of that is alleviated there. And then my final guy here is DeMarvin Leal, which I'm going to stick with Texas A&M. Another guy at Texas A&M. He's a defensive tackle, and kind of what Jared touched on with the Max Mitchell thing. It's kind of the same thing on the opposite side of the ball. Although I don't think he was as bad athletically, he was undersized. So you're looking at 283 pounds. And whenever you're a defensive tackle, I mean, if you're a freak athlete like Aaron Donald is, you can kind of get away with being that small. But whenever you're just kind of average, it's projected to be, kind of that athletic defensive tackle, undersized guy. But he ran a 5.0 40 and only had a 27.5-inch vertical at 284 pounds. And when you're a defensive tackle, those numbers don't really bode well for you. So I'll be kind of curious to see how that ends up because, as Jared touched on, when you're undersized and not necessarily an elite athlete, you kind of have an uphill climb for success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that one. That's a tough combination to get past. So I mean, it's not impossible, but definitely have his work cut out for him.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. That gives you 9 guys on, our winners, 9 guys on our winners, 9 guys on our losers. I'm losing my mind. It's late at night.
We talked about 18 players out of the God knows how many that were at the combine. Right. So like there's so much more to get into, but you can only get into so much without sitting here for 4 hours. So
it's like Landon's 18th podcast too, I believe.
Yeah, Landon's been putting in the overtime, man. Landon's been all over the place right now. So, for good reason. The man knows, the man puts in the work, he puts in the time, he knows what he's talking about. So, it's good that if Landon's out there talking about football, that means there's less hot takes and more actually informed discussions happening. So it's a good thing that he's making his rounds talking about other podcasts as well. So, and hopefully we'll have some other surprise guests coming on here to join us as well too, courtesy of Landon doing some recruiting of his own. So
we got some big things lined up for sure. Some things I'm really excited to share with all of our listeners. And, I think we have one coming up very soon as well. If you're a Colts fan, especially, with the Colts news, as far as, what's going to happen at quarterback when it finally does happen. And then $70.5 million going into free agency, you're probably looking at some free agent signings as well. So we have a guest that's really tight end that should be coming on relatively soon as well to join us for some of that Colts discussion. Really excited to get him on here. And there's some other guys as well, especially once we get into fantasy season, see if we can reel some of the big fish in. And, that way you're not just listening to our takes, but, we're getting some guys that are a little more established in the industry to join us as well. But yeah, like Drew said, I crave intelligent discussion. Stay away from hot takes. I mean, hot takes get you clicks, it gets you views, but it doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you smarter at football, especially. And, I've kind of drifted away from some of the bigger name network shows as a fan because of that, because I do crave that intelligent discussion. So whenever we were talking about what we wanted in a podcast, this is kind of where we fell into is like, we want people to be able to learn some things, as well as, make you a little bit smarter in football, maybe touch on some names, some guys that, you haven't heard of, like we just did in our combine reaction. Maybe you aren't familiar with any of these players. Maybe you are familiar with these players and you want a second opinion. You want to look. This gives you guys the tools to where, hey, I can go watch the film on this guy, see what matches up with the combine numbers that we just told you, and see what you agree. So if you are listening to that kind of stuff, you are watching film, or, you have some guys that are winners and losers for you, if you're like us and you're just a junkie for football,
right.
Just go ahead and like pop that down there in the comments section.
Yes, please.
And then also too, like, don't be afraid, like follow us on Twitter, tag us on Twitter. Let us know. And, at 3 Man Rush Podcast, let us know, some things that you would want to hear from us as well, because, granted, like I said, we're not in the hot take business for sure, but we definitely want to give you guys a chance to have your voices heard. And, that way we're touching all bases.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I mean, look, the reality is we're talking about football, and free agency hasn't even happened yet. We got free agency right around the corner. We're going to put out a couple of mock drafts before the actual NFL draft itself happens. So I'm almost to the point where I'm going to get to talk about Sauce Gardner. I cannot wait for that.
Yeah, there was actually speaking of you and Sauce Gardner, there's actually a Twitter poll that was put up on the page earlier today, and I want to give you the results here. So,
did you do a Sauce Gardner versus Derek Stingley?
Well, and some other quarterbacks, but so the tweet was, I put a poll up on the the podcast. I said, hey, Drew and me are split as well on our cornerback one in the draft. Drew is a Sauce Gardner guy. Landon, myself, I'm a Stingley Jr. guy.
Right.
So I gave you an option, who is your cornerback one in the draft class? You have Sauce Gardner, you have Derek Stingley, and then also put others. And then, you could list, who you think's cornerback one in the class. So right now we're at 22 votes. You're going to hate this. 100% Derek Stingley.
Really, 100%?
100% sided with me.
Wow. I mean, I don't have a huge problem with that, because honestly, it's more like a 1A, 1B thing for me.
Right.
But
yeah,
Gardner
I don't think you can go wrong with either of those guys.
No, Gardner is 1A for me, though. And then, I mean, there's guys like Trent McDuffie from Washington as well. And Kyler Gordon too, which he was listed as a loser for some people from the combine from Washington. There's some good corners in the class, but I think the top two are very, very clear. Like very clear. I think it's Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. So I don't have a problem with that. I just, we'll get into Sauce. I'll get into him much more as we talk about mock drafts, but just spoiler alert, I love the guy.
So speaking too of the mock drafts, you should probably keep your eyes open. We will have mock draft 1.0 coming out very soon, possibly even as early as a week from today.
Yeah, I mean, that mock draft 1.0 and free agency reactions are basically the two things on deck.
And obviously too, like those are two huge shows, so we're probably not going to combine them because probably don't want to listen to like a 4 or 5 hour podcast.
And the MLB's back. Like baseball is back in business, and that's the only other sport we really even touch on outside of football. So like, there's going to be baseball discussion coming too. Like that, thank God they figured that out. Like I'm ecstatic, just like outside of my brain. So we got that coming too. So if you're like, if you're obviously if you're listening, you're a football fan, but if you like baseball as well, we got some baseball content coming for you too. So be sure to stick around for that too.
Yeah.
I'm excited about baseball.
Yeah, how I am with football, that's how Drew is with baseball. So there's a wealth of knowledge of baseball sitting above me in the screen caption. I think that ends our show today. We thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, follow us on Twitter at 3Man Rush Podcast. If you are listening on YouTube or watching us on YouTube, go ahead, subscribe, like the video, hit the bell notification. That way you can be notified whenever we do post new videos. And especially now that things are getting in full swing, we're going to be posting a lot more. Don't want to miss out on that. And also comment in your comment section. Like I said, what are some winners from you? What are some losers from you? Maybe you have a reaction to the Carson Wentz news. Maybe you have a reaction to the Khalil Mack trade. Go ahead and shoot us a comment down there as well. And make sure to share it. And then if you are a podcast listener, you want to listen to us talk for whatever reason on your way to work, on your way at, lifting weights at the gym, any of that stuff. We are on Spotify. We are on Prime Music as well. So pretty much almost wherever you can find podcasts, we are there. So that being said, thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode. And we will see you early next week when free agency kicks off.